Okay guys, I'm gonna have to say that this video is just as big a surprise to me as it is to you, and that's because I got my dirty hands on a reel that, for one, I didn't think would be available until next year. For two, I thought I'd have to buy it with my own money, which I have no problems doing. And for three, in my opinion, this was the most exciting baitcast revealed at this year's iCast, and I felt it should have won the Best of Show in the freshwater baitcaster category hands down. And that of course is the OKUMA HAKAI. And HAKAI, I believe, means destruction in Japanese. Now it says HAKAI DT. I'm not sure what the DT stands for, but yeah, you guys need to give a huge thanks to Jonathan over at OKUMA USA. For one, he contacted me a few days ago and told me he had a very limited number of these reels, I guess, to give out to different reviewers, and he picked me as one of them. And for two, I informed him that of course I would love to get my hands on one of these reels to try out, but just know that on this channel I don't do reviews in a vacuum where I just talk about the reel. I put reels up against each other and up against their competition in cast battles where there are no ties. One reel is going to win, one reel is going to lose. He had no problem with that, and it takes a company, especially an American company, a big set of balls to send me out a reel to review, knowing that it could potentially lose a cast battle here and there against his competition. So once again, big shout out to Jonathan over at OKUMA USA. So before we break into this box and show everybody what they've been wanting to see, I just want to say that this is a kind of a funny fact about me, but an OKUMA spinning reel was the first nice reel that I ever owned. And what I mean by nice is that it wasn't one of these, I guess, throwaway reels that you get at Walmart. And I might show you guys that reel one day and tell you the backstory behind it, but I know you guys want to check out this HAKAI reel as much as I do. Alright, ooh, look at that. Look at that. We got some paperwork here. And I am definitely going to read any instructions that are in there, because luckily they should be in English. Well, here's the instructions right here. And here's the reel. So let's throw the box and the instructions off to the side. And let's check this reel out. Boom. Check that out. Look at that side plate, guys. Ooh, super solid thumb bar. Okay, very, very smooth so far. Check out this handle. Wow. There's a lot to take in here. Okay, the graphics are pretty understated. But I'm going to let you guys take a good look at this reel. Take in all the details you can. Ooh, that's hard to turn. And of course, I'm going to be doing my customary detailed inspection, writing down all the cool little things that I see on this reel, and I will be right back. So now that I have this reel in hand, what do you guys think of its looks? Now personally, I think it is what I would call a very generically handsome reel. You know, it's wider towards the middle and back and tapers off towards the front. And a lot of its good looks, in my opinion, come from the detailing. Very similar to PISCIFUN's Alloy M, where you had a generically handsome frame and body, but then you have a very detailed, distinctive side plate, which the HAKAI definitely has. And then it's got a very nice sculpted side plate on the other side as well. And when you combine it with, all its nice looking components and this very, very distinctive thumb bar, I think you have a really good looking reel. And when you combine it with the on paper specs of this reel, what we have here is probably the most exciting baitcaster OKUMA has made to date. Okay, so my inspection is over and I mounted the HAKAI on a couple of different rods, including this Major Craft Speed Style, and I'll have to say this is one of the most comfortable reels I've palmed to date. Now, it's fairly low profile. Your thumb naturally fits right in this center section here, this recessed area. It's got a lot of space for your thumb to rest on. And the side plate, while as you can see it is very busy with a lot of design details, there is nothing sticking out, no sharp edges that dig into my hand, and it's just very, very comfortable to palm. And if you recall, when I took this reel out of the box, I didn't really mention anything about size because it really didn't strike me as being a super small reel or a super big reel. Now usually when I do an unboxing and the reel is really tiny, I'll say something about it, but this HAKAI is very deceptive. I think it's probably due to the all black color scheme, but this reel is pretty small. And with that being said, we're going to do some size comparisons. Okay, so I brought out several reels of different sizes and brands, and we're going to start off with the Shimano CURADO 200K. And I'm comparing the HAKAI to the CURADO because they could be potentially considered competition for each other because of how close they are in price. And you can see that the CURADO has a smaller frame than the HAKAI, at least from the top, but when you flip them over to the side, the HAKAI sits noticeably lower than the CURADO. And more importantly, the palm side plate of the HAKAI is much smaller. So while the CURADO K technically has a smaller frame and it is very comfortable to palm, the HAKAI, since it sits a little bit lower and has less palm side plate surface area, it is definitely more comfortable to palm than the CURADO, as well as being significantly lighter as well. Now next up is another reel that could be considered competition for the OKUMA, and that is the TATULA 100. And it doesn't really come through on the camera that well, but the HAKAI is definitely smaller than the TATULA, especially width-wise. But this comparison also shows you what the HAKAI would look like compared to the TATULA SV and the TATULA Elites. Now, comparing the side view, it looks like the HAKAI is definitely lower, and you can definitely see that the top plate of the TATULA angles upwards, so it doesn't palm nearly as low as the frame suggests. But that's the comparison next to the TATULA 100. Alright, so next up is a reel that is one of my favorites when it comes to palming ergonomics, and that is the LEWS Pro SP. And you can see they have two distinctively different shapes. The Pro SP is shorter and wider, while the HAKAI is longer and narrower. And when you compare the side view, it actually looks like the LEWS may have a slight advantage in height, being lower profile. But yeah, both reels are extremely comfortable to palm, and honestly I give the edge to the HAKAI because how flat the side plate is, while on the LEWS it is a little bit more curved. Now next up is a reel that was introduced at this year's ICAST as well. That is the CURADO 150 MGL. Now the 150 looks to be shorter. They look about the same width, so it looks like the MGL 150 looks like it's slightly smaller. And when viewed from the side, if the camera would focus, they are about the same, but you can see that the top part of the frame on the 150 is angled upwards, kind of similar to DAIWA's TATULA 100. Okay, so the last two reels are really small reels, and we have the CURADO MGL 70. Now, comparing these two through the naked eye, they're actually very similar. What's deceptive is this smaller and narrower top plate on the CURADO, but the body width for both of these reels are almost the same pretty much. But the HAKAI is just slightly bigger. And now let's compare the side plate. It looks like the 70 is a little bit lower. Both of them very comfortable to palm. I give the edge to the CURADO because it palms just a little bit smaller. Alright, so the last reel we're going to compare sizes with is going to be Shimano's SLX XT. And yeah, the XT is a little bit smaller. They are very similar. I think the XT is a little bit slimmer than the HAKAI. And it looks like it is a little bit lower when you compare the side profile as well. So all in all, I think that this HAKAI is considered a medium to small size reel when compared with other current reels. So now it's time to talk about the impressive specs on this reel. And the first spec I want to talk about is the fact that this HAKAI is sporting a magnesium frame. So that means that the reel is going to be very light, and according to some people, that means the reel is going to be more sensitive than, I guess, reels with aluminum frames, because there are a growing number of people who say that magnesium frame reels, because they are lighter and I guess magnesium is more porous, giving it a very hollow feel, is more sensitive when it comes to bottom contact techniques. Now, the second spec I'm going to talk about is, if you take a look at the gearbox hanging off the side of the HAKAI, it is huge, and that's because the HAKAI is sporting a 42mm brass gear. Now here in America, a lot of people love brass gears because they say they are more durable, but they also provide a smoother, more buttery retrieve than a lot of aluminum gears. So that's definitely a plus for the American market. Now the HAKAI actually is going to be coming in 3 different models. Now you have your regular model, which is what I have, and among the regular models it's going to come in 3 different gear ratios. You got your 6.2 to 1, you also have a 7.3 to 1, and an 8.1 to 1, and you'll be able to differentiate these ratios because they're going to be color coding the nut retainer for the different ratios. So apparently the 6.2 is going to have the silver nut retainer, and I believe the 7.3 is going to be sporting like a yellow or a gold, while the 8.1 to 1 is going to be sporting a red nut retainer. Now as far as the other 2 models go, there's going to be a pitching and flipping model, which I think is going to have a even shallower spool than the regular models, and there's supposed to be a bait finesse model, and I'm definitely going to be getting my hands on one of those. Now the HAKAI is going to be sporting, I guess, what they call a multi-disc hybrid carbon drag with a max stopping power of 20 pounds. And here's a spec that is kind of surprising. It's a relatively low bearing count at 6+1, so a very Shimano-like bearing count, but I can tell you this, the retrieve on the HAKAI is very smooth. Now they did point out that 2 of the bearings were called NMB bearings, or basically that's just an acronym for Nippon something bearings. It's basically bearings made in Japan, and they're probably the spool bearings. Now other than that, I believe the side plates are made of graphite, nothing about carbon fiber or anything like that, and the reel is made in China, which I have no problem with that at all. Now let's go over some of the cool features of this reel. Now the first thing I want to point out is that the star drag is probably one of the coolest design star drags I've ever seen. It's a really sharp design, and hopefully you guys can tell it's made from what they call the C40X carbon, and it's got that raw marbled look like DAIWA's Zion drag stars. and of course it does click, and the clicks are very positive, and there is hardly any dead space between the clicks. So I would consider them to be almost micro clicks. Now the spool tension got a nice little design with 2 silver bands to break up all this black. Now it does not click, unfortunately, and it is a little bit hard to turn. It's going to take a little bit of effort, but once it's turning, it's actually very, very smooth. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a metal insert under there. Now check out this handle. It is 90 millimeters. It is swept, but can you see something there when I show you guys from the top? Because of the design, I guess it's a revolver-like design. I guess the creases on each arm start at different places. So when you look at it from the top, you can see the bottom arm on each side. So right there's the bottom arm, and here's the top arm, and same on the other side. So that's kind of cool. And they are going with a very stylish, I guess, minimalistic nut and a nice looking nut retainer similar to DAIWA. And while I personally do not like power knobs, at least I know the standard model does come with these EVA power knobs. And the good thing about it is that these seem to be very high density, high quality foam, not cheap ones that feel like they're sucking the moisture out of your fingertips when you touch them. So this definitely lends to the smooth cranking feeling when you're turning the handle. And here's another cool little feature. You get a line indicator, and it is mounted right here in between the side plate and the drag star, and you see that little arrow there. And yeah, check out all these numbers, and you'll see they have a PE rating, which is usually a Japanese designation for braid. But the way that you make adjustments to this is you have to, I guess, put your thumb here and your finger on the other side, and you literally will be turning the drag star when you make adjustments to this line indicator. I can't seem to get it to turn any way else. Just like that. So yeah, when you're turning this line indicator, you will be messing with your drag setting, so keep that in mind. Now, I've said it in the past with reels of other brands that have, you know, line indicator dials and this and that. I thought it was gimmicky in the past, but now that I have so many reels spooled up with all sorts of different fluorocarbon, I definitely can't tell what size fluorocarbon I have just by looking at it, so it will come in handy. Now the line guide is not tapered, but you'll see it's an oversized oval shape, and it is poked out pretty far from the spool, so that's good. And the last thing I want to bring up is this very unique looking thumb bar. Now it is a shiny gloss black, which could cause, I guess, grip problems for your thumb, but they've got these ridges molded into it, and it gives a surprising amount of traction. So I'm sliding my thumb down and up of this thumb bar, and yeah, it actually gives you a lot of grip. And once again, the thumb bar is solid, no mush, no wiggle, no slop, and that goes from when it's engaged and disengaged. So very, very good feeling thumb bar, and that's something of a pet peeve of mine, especially if the reel is kind of pricey. So now that we've gone over all that, let's get into probably the most impressive thing about the HAKAI, and that's going to be its spool. So of course with that, I'm going to bust the scales out. Okay, so of course before we get to the spool, we have to get a weight on the reel, and because once again the frame is made of magnesium, OKUMA says that it should come in at under 6 ounces. So what does the scale say? 5.94. Let's do it again. 5.93 this time, so yes, the HAKAI definitely comes in at under 6 ounces. So I think that actually makes the HAKAI one of the lightest reels in its price class. But now it's time to get to the heart of this reel, and that is going to be this flight spool. So before we get to the spool weight, I just wanted to show you guys how to open up the side plate to actually get to the spool. Now if you flip the reel over, usually on other reels you'll see some kind of a latch or some kind of switch that you'll flip, but there's nothing on the HAKAI. So I took a look at the side plate, and it is very, I guess, Shimano BANTAM-esque in the fact that you have this center section here, and you actually have to flip this little piece up just like that. Now it actually takes a little bit of effort, so I don't think it's going to come loose out on the water. And then when you actually close it, it actually closes with an audible click. So pretty cool design there for the HAKAI, but yeah, it does take a little bit of effort to flip this piece up. And let me see if I can actually get the spool out. It's going to take some effort. I might have to actually refer to the instructions. Okay, I see now. I didn't have it turned all the way. Alright, it's coming out now. Oh wow, look at that. Here's the brakes. We'll get to the brakes here in a second. But check this out. This is this is crazy. This has got like a shiny mirror plate here, I guess, to activate against the magnets. Check that out. Am I blinding you guys? Now Okuma calls this spool the flight spool, and I believe they designed this spool in collaboration with Dream Tackle, which I believe they made aftermarket bait finesse spools for a short period a few years ago. I'm not sure if they still do that, but obviously Dream Tackle is very experienced in making light spools. Now what was shocking about this spool was that Okuma just came out with the weight of the spool at supposedly 9.5 grams with the bearing. Now I have never ever seen an American tackle company just blatantly come out and tell you how light or how heavy their spools are, with the exception of recently Shimano with their CURADO BFS, because of course that's a bait finesse reel. But coming in at 9.5 grams with the bearing, I'd be bragging about that as well. Now the weight is not the only thing that's cool about this spool. It actually has a couple of pretty cutting edge features. The first one is the flight shaft. You can see the line capacity there. It still holds quite a bit of line, but the flight shaft is this. Now you can see that they're using a long spool shaft just like Shimano does, but to reduce weight most companies will employ an aluminum shaft. Now with the flight spool they employed a stainless steel shaft, but what they did is they hollowed it out to reduce the weight, so you get the strength of a stainless steel shaft but probably the weight of an aluminum shaft. And then not only that, hopefully my camera will focus there, but hopefully you'll see that at the end there, yes, there are two little balls pressed into the ends of the spools. You can see on the other side here as well. And yes, they spin and rotate. So basically that should decrease the friction, therefore giving this spool in theory a very low startup inertia, and it's probably going to make this spool really fast. So let's hope so, because I like fast spools. Now once again, Okuma claims the spool is going to be 9.5 grams with the bearing, so let's see what the scale says. Ooh, just a tad bit lighter at 9.6 grams. But I'm not too worried about that 1/10 of a gram. 9.6. Well, It went down to 9.5 for a brief moment, but of course I'm going to take that bearing off and see what the true rotational mass is. And you can kind of see there is some grease on the spool shaft. Doesn't look like it's on the bearing. Well, at least there's a little piece on the outside, but yeah, I'm going to take this bearing off and we're going to get a true rotational mass on this flight spool. Okay, so quick update. It looks like OKUMA has done like Shimano, and they have, I guess, their own version of Silent Tune. I didn't see anything about this in, I guess, the spec sheet, but there's an O-ring there, and that O-ring keeps this bearing from moving around back and forth, at least very much, during the cast. So that's pretty much what Shimano does with their Silent Tune. So by comparison, here's the spool of another reel that has a bearing. You'll see the bearing has a lot of movement back and forth. And yeah, so it's going to be kind of difficult to get that bearing over that O-ring, but I'm going to try. Okay guys, so update here. Unfortunately, I could not take the spool bearing off without risk of snapping that rubber O-ring, and I definitely don't want to do that because OKUMA put it there for a reason. But if we do a little bit of math here, the average 5x11x4 spool bearing is going to weigh about 1.5 to 1.6 grams. Now there is another spool bearing out there that's slightly lighter, and that weighs about 1.1 grams. So potentially this spool could have a rotational mass of either 8.4 grams at the most or 7.9 grams at the least. So that is very, very impressive, especially for a non-bait finesse reel. And in fact, OKUMA states that this reel should be able to cast down to 3 grams with no problem. Now I'm not sure if they were referring to the bait finesse model or the regular model, but we're going to test that out. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a graphic for you guys, and the HAKAI looks like it could potentially be the lightest spool I've ever weighed for a non-bait finesse reel. So that's very, very impressive. So the spool is lighter than the ANTARES, it's lighter than the METANIUM, it's lighter than the STEEZ, and it could potentially be lighter than the REVO MG Extreme. And these are all reels that are much, much more expensive. So needless to say, I am very excited to string this reel up and take it out on the water and do some casting with it. So before we pop that spool back in, let me show you guys a couple of things. Now the first thing is going to be the brake system. Now initially when I read about the HAKAI a couple of months ago, I read something about it having centrifugal brakes, and that got me really, really excited. But apparently that was a typo, because the HAKAI comes with magnetic brakes, and it is a static mag track style system, as you guys can see. But instead of sporting the usual silver magnets, these magnets are black, and there's a total of 8 installed, and there's 2 slots here that are kind of filled with some kind of a cushy foam material. I'm sure you can put that out and stick 2 extra magnets in if you need, but with the potential of having an extremely fast spool, hopefully these magnets are strong enough. Now of course the adjustment is going to be made on the outside, so there's really no need to open up the side plate on this. While you're out fishing, all the adjustments are going to be made with this dial, and as you guys saw, it is on the bottom instead of the top like the Shimano Bantam. Now the brake dial goes from 1 to 10, but turning the dial, it doesn't click. There are no clicking adjustments, and while that might be a turn off to some people, it makes this somewhat an infinitely adjustable brake system, just like Shimano. Now another thing is that I was turning the handle and it felt pretty smooth. There's no kind of clacking noise. And I took a look in there, and I also took a look at the diagram, and it looks like the pinion on the HAKAI is double supported, but the thing is, it's supported by 1 bearing and 1 bushing. So the bearing is going to be on this end where the spool tension knob is, and the bushing is where you can see it. But usually if a pinion doesn't have double support, it'll make a clackety sound when you turn the handle and the spool's not in it. But the cool thing is you can probably replace that bushing with a bearing if you want to. But I don't think you'll need to because it is very, very smooth. Okay guys, so wow, OKUMA HAKAI. Definitely the most exciting baitcaster that OKUMA has ever released. And I'm going to say it's probably one of the most exciting baitcasters to be released in a long time period. Now, out of all its impressive specs and features, there's one thing about this reel that I haven't talked about yet, and it's probably the most impressive spec yet. And that's saying something considering, you know, the cutting edge technology of the supremely lightweight spool, the lightweight and supreme palmability, the fact that it's very smooth, very solid, very quiet, and all the cool looking components on this reel. And that spec is going to be the price. The OKUMA HAKAI starts out at only $169. So that is unheard of for a magnesium framed reel. Now, about 10 years ago, Fluger came out with a magnesium framed spinning reel that took the spinning reel world by storm because they priced it at only $200. But there was no equivalent magnesium baitcaster that was priced as low up until now. And in fact, the second cheapest magnesium reel is going to be that LEWS reel, coming in at $299, so significantly more expensive than this OKUMA. Now, if you go to the big three like Abu Garcia, their cheapest magnesium reel is going to be the REVO MGX at $400. Now with DAIWA, their cheapest magnesium reel is going to be the STEEZ SV at $550. And then with Shimano, their cheapest is going to be the METANIUM and the ALDEBARAN at $420 a piece. So you could literally buy almost 3 of these HAKAIs for the price of a METANIUM. And I believe it's lighter than a METANIUM as well. So I'm going to put a graphic up on the screen for you guys, and I'm going to list all the magnesium frame reels currently for sale today in America and how much each of them cost. Now the finesse model and the pitching and flipping model is going to be a little bit more expensive at $185, but that is still a huge bargain. So that makes this HAKAI one of the biggest reel bargains of all time. Now the thing is, I do not know when they're going to be coming in for sale. Now Tackle Warehouse shows a estimated delivery date of February 4th, I think, but of course that could change at any time, and these reels could show up way sooner than that. So keep your eyes peeled, and maybe Jonathan will let me know when a shipment of them comes in, and I'll let you guys know so you can get one of these reels. But the next step, of course, is we're going to string this reel up, stick it on a rod, and we're going to cast it around. I'm very eager to see what this spool does, and I know you guys are too. Alright guys, thanks a lot.